Automobiles can be so fake. Over the years, cars have been outfitted with fake horse heads, fake wire wheels, fake wood, fake scoops, and fake Landau bars. But today, I want to talk about one of the oddest and bulgiest trends in automotive fakery. These cars all have some extra junk on their trunk. The fake spare tire is today's topic, here on Hubcap Club. In the early days of motoring, tire technology was slightly less advanced than today, and carrying one or more spares was essential. Most cars stored their spare tires externally, either on the back or mounted on the side behind the front fender as a side mount. But by 1939, when the first Lincoln Continental was custom crafted for Edsel Ford by chopping, channeling, and shortening a Lincoln Zephyr, most American cars had larger trunks that allowed the spare to be hidden inside. As the hand-built Continental neared completion, they discovered that the abbreviated trunk simply would not accommodate a spare, so it was hung off the back in the traditional style. It was a happy accident. The external spare emphasized the sporty European aesthetic designer Bob Gregory was going for. The production version of the Continental integrated the spare into the rear bodywork and added a body-colored tread ring and faceplate for an even sleeker look. Starting in the early 1950s, exterior spare tire mounts became popular again, commonly called Continental kits as a nod to the classic Lincoln. Most of these were aftermarket or dealer installed, but some cars came that way right from the factory, like the humble Nash Metropolitan and the luxurious Packard Caribbean. But this video is not about cars with genuine external spare tires. No, it's about cars that added tire-shaped bumps or bulges to the trunk lid, not in an effort to deceive, but to evoke the prestige of the classic era. The trunk bump trend kicked off with the Continental Mark II, the follow-up to the original Continental. When it was introduced in 1956, the Mark II was the most expensive car built in America. As a tip of the hat to the original, the Mark II has a big bump on the trunk in the shape of a tire. Fake spare tire, right? Not exactly. In a strange and unexpected way, this car doesn't really fit into the fake category. At least, not without an asterisk. Yes, the Mark II had a secret. I'm sure many of my knowledgeable viewers already know what I'm talking about. The secret is revealed when you pop the trunk. You learn that the Mark II actually stored its spare behind that bulge. In fact, the bulge was necessary to accommodate it. It seems like it comes at the expense of easy access to the trunk, however. The next innovation in fake spare tire technology appeared on the 1957 Imperial. The 57 Chrysler Corporation lineup was decidedly modern, punctuated by sky-high fins. Today, Virgil Exner is well known for the aviation-influenced forward-look cars he styled for Chrysler in the 1950s. But Exner really loved the cars of the 20s and 30s. X, as his friends called him, loved to sneak classic details onto the cars he styled, like the freestanding pod headlights on this 61 Imperial. Just a few years before his death in 1973, X styled the retro-to-the-max Stutz Blackhawk. More on that car in a moment. But now, as Charles Phoenix might say, behold the glory of this 1957 Imperial with its majestic flight sweep rear deck. Imperial called it flight sweep, but most people I knew derisively called it a toilet seat or a trash can lid. In this Imperial literature, it's referred to as the assimilated rear deck tire mount. I honestly don't know what is meant by assimilated. Is it like the Borg in Star Trek? A typo seems likely, as it was called a simulated deck tire mount in this other 57 brochure. It was available as an option on all Imperials. X may have used the 1934 Chrysler Imperial Airflow's external rear tire mount as his inspiration for the 57 Imperial's ornamental protuberance. But, unlike the Airflow, there was no spare there. On 1957 to 63 Imperials, the actual spare is conveniently and conventionally stowed flat on the trunk's floor. Studebaker copied this design for the 1958 Packard Hawk, and as far as I'm aware, that is the only non-Chrysler vehicle to follow the flight sweep trend. In 1959, the flight sweep rear deck went decidedly downmarket when Plymouth's version, called the Sport Deck, was introduced. It was standard on the Sport Fury and optional on other Plymouths through 1960. Chrysler gave it a shot for 1960, standard on the 300F and optional on other Chryslers. Chrysler called it flight sweep just like Imperial, and this brochure has the best description I've ever read. A smooth, sculptured circle with aluminum and chrome center. Also in 1960, the compact Valiant was launched, with the simulated spare tire stamped into the deck lid of every 60 and 61 Valiant sedan. I have to say, this is one of my least favorite Exner designs. It's a hodgepodge of Exnerisms without a coherent theme to hold it all together. The flight sweep rear deck definitely lost its last shred of dignity after it was slapped onto a low-budget compact, but it was still offered as an option on Imperials all the way through 1963. As I mentioned earlier, Virgil Exner also designed the retro to the max Stutz Blackhawk, which entered limited production in 1970. This car fulfilled X's dream of a real spare tire protruding through the rear deck. In fact, on this 1971 car, the tire hangs off the back and literally serves as the car's rear bumper. This was obviously before the 5-mile-an-hour bumper regulations took effect later in the 70s. Later versions, like this 1985 model, fully fulfilled X's dream, mimicking his 50s designs with real rubber. Guess rich people don't really care about trunk space. After Exner left Chrysler, he was replaced as chief stylist by Elwood Engel, the man behind the iconic 1961 Lincoln Continental. In styling the all-new 1964 Imperial, Engel reprised many of the Continental's cues, including the clean, slab-sided body. But one 64 Imperial styling cue came from an earlier Continental, the suggestion of a spare tire bulge on the deck lid. Although much different from Exner's approach, it added a classic touch and continuity with the previous generation of Imperials. This time, there would be no literal circular representation of a tire. The 1964 rear view features a subtle trapezoidal bump. It represents a classical external mount in an abstract way, obviously not trying to fool anyone while still paying homage to the classics of yesteryear. This stylized design was carried over for 1965, but on the 66 Imperial, the bump was enlarged and squared off, finally purging Virgil Exner's classic era nostalgia. It was the perfect conclusion to Chrysler's flirtation with retro themes, at least until the 90s. But it wouldn't be long before the fake spare tire was resurrected by the make that started it all. In the spring of 1968, Lincoln premiered the Continental Mark III, a personal luxury coupe in the tradition of the original Continental and Mark II. It was a passion project of Ford VP Lee Iacocca, intended to compete with the Cadillac Eldorado. Actually, this wasn't the first car named the Continental Mark III. The unsuccessful 1958 through 1960 Continentals were dubbed Marks III, IV, and V, but Ford decided to pretend they never existed when it came to naming the new Mark III. Iacocca supposedly told design chief Gene Bourdonnais to put a Rolls-Royce grille on a Thunderbird. The Mark III was based on the T-Bird, but its masculine, squared-up styling gracefully disguises that the two cars share the same underpinnings. And Lincoln stylists didn't stop with the grille. They also aped the Mark II by adding a large fake spare tire bulge on the deck lid. The Mark III was a huge hit and spearheaded a new era of Marks with trunk humps that lasted nearly 30 years. Here's a parade of Marks. Mark III, 1969. Mark IV, 1972. Hard to believe that this amount of trunk space on so large a car was ever considered acceptable. Mark V, 1977. Notice on all these marks that the bumper stampings complete the bottom part of the tire bulge. It's a little touch that really helps the fake spare tire look almost real. Integrating the bumper with the bulge was finally dropped for the downsized 1980 Mark VI. probably to save money. It was the first and only Mark that came in a 4-door version. But Marks weren't the only Malaise-era Lincolns to get a bump on the trunk. Lincoln's saddest car of the 70s has to be the 1977 Versailles. Not only was this would-be Cadillac Seville competitor a thinly disguised Ford Granada, but Lincoln had the audacity to make it the most expensive car in their lineup. Painfully awkward is the way I describe how the spare tire stamping is forced to house the fuel filler door, because that's where the Granada's fuel filler is. It frankly destroys any illusion that there's a tire behind that bulge, unless it's a flat tire. I actually owned a 1977 Granada, purchased for $500 in 1987. Very much like the one in this photo, except mine had a burgundy vinyl top. 10 Midwestern winters had not been kind to it. The silver paint was mostly gone, and the vinyl roof was cracked and peeling, just like this one. One day, the rusty front bumper just fell off the car. Every time I see a Versailles, I think of that Granada and wince. For 1979, the Versailles added a vinyl half roof that gave the car a more formal appearance and disguised the Granada heritage a little better. Lincoln also added padding on the tire bulge, because why not? I guess buyers liked these updates because sales more than doubled from the previous year. But sales plummeted again for 1980, the Versailles' final year. In 1982, Lincoln launched the all-new and more distinctively styled Lincoln Continental, copying the Cadillac Seville's bustleback rear styling. But Continental made it their own by adding its signature fake tire treatment right in the middle of the bustle. Then came the Lincoln Continental Mark VII in 1984. Downsized yet again, the Mark VII dumped the boxy look of previous Marks and adopted a more rounded and aerodynamic shape. In the rear, while keeping the trunk bump, the stamping was faired into the trunk lid to reduce drag, and the crease faded out before it reached the lip. But the toned-down fake spare still seemed like an old-fashioned affectation on such a modern-looking car. In 1993, Lincoln introduced the very last Mark, the Mark VIII. It fully embraced Ford's Jelly Bean styling, but still maintained a vestigial fake spare tire, reportedly mandated by Ford upper management as a non-negotiable hallmark of the brand. What the stylist did was essentially melt the spare tire, flattening and widening the bump to reduce its visual impact as well as drag. According to this 1993 brochure, the characteristic Mark deck lid shape has been retained but is now expressed in an abstract, pure form. I'll let you judge for yourself. 1998 was the year the tire hump died for good when the last Mark rolled off the assembly line. It was the end of an era. Now, I wasn't planning on covering aftermarket fake spare tires in this video, but I had to include this early 80s Cadillac Eldorado that sports both a Continental kit and a flight sweep style simulated spare. This would definitely get you some attention at your local Cars and Coffee. I doubt we'll see a new car with a fake spare tire anytime soon. Today, many cars have no spare at all, much less a fake one. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and select to receive all notifications. Doing this is so important to the success of this channel as it signals YouTube to recommend my videos to more people. And if you're so inclined, leave a comment. I read them all, and often I learn something new. As always, I appreciate your suggestions for future topics. For even more Hubcap Club, follow my daily posts on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Until next time, for Hubcap Club, I'm Rob.